The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome from New Haven, Connecticut, and thank you to everyone in the audience for tuning in. Welcome to Nature's Returns, Investing in Ecosystem Services. This webinar series is sponsored by the Yale Center for Business and the Environment and the Conservation Finance Network, a program of Island Press. My name is Benjamin Dare Rothfuss. I am a current Master of Environmental Management student at Yale, and I will be your host for today's presentation, The Green Broker Network. This week, we feature the 2014 winners of the International Society of Tropical Foresters Forest Finance Innovation Prize, Scott Landis, President of Greenwood, and Yadira Molina Cruz, Director of Resource Management and Advocacy, Fundación Madera Verde. Yadira Molina is a Honduran forester with more than 20 years working in the forestry sector in the Atlantic North Coast of Honduras, with specific experience in community forestry with the agroforestry cooperatives organized under the social forestry system. Founded 2 decades ago, the Green Broker Network combines technical training and practical research with savvy marketing and equitable financial relationships to create environmental, social, and economic benefits for forest communities and the recipients of their wood products. Before I turn the presentation over to Scott to introduce himself, I wanted to share a few quick reminders. This 60-minute webinar will be recorded and made available through iTunes U, and a copy of the presentation will be available on the CBAY website under the Outreach tab. Please do not take screenshots or pictures of the presentation, as some of the information is sensitive. The presentation will last approximately 40 minutes and be followed by a question and answer session. Please see the question box in the Webinar Tools panel and type your questions during the presentation as they come up or as you are inspired. We will relay your questions to Scott during the talk and at the end of the slideshow. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to you, Scott.
Thanks very much, Ben. And I want to also extend our gratitude to the Yale Center for Business and the Environment and for providing this terrific opportunity to speak to all of you today on behalf of myself and my colleague Yadira Molina, who's with us on the line from Honduras. Before I launch into the presentation today, I just wanted to briefly give you a thumbnail sketch of my own background. I am the founder of Greenwood, and before that, the founder of an organization called WARP, the Woodworkers Alliance for Rainforest Protection, which is the progenitor of Greenwood. I've been in this business for 20 to 25 years now. And I come to it with a background as a woodworker, a writer, and with a lifelong passion for wood, for trees, and for forests. And just on a personal note, it was a trip that I took to the Amazon in the late 80s to visit a fairly well-known forest management project in the Palcasu Valley that got me started on this whole project. But that's another story and for another time. Yadira and I have worked together for at least 10 years, and she is a co-founder of Fundación Madera Verde with me in Honduras. So with that bit of background, I will launch into today's presentation, which is an introduction to what we call the Green Broker Network that was established by Greenwood and Fundación Madera Verde in Honduras. And the Green Broker Network really grew out of a field project that began in 1993 under the auspices of the Woodworkers Alliance for Rainforest Protection. The WARP was a group of woodworkers that really had formed around the concept of helping woodworkers understand and address the problems of deforestation. And the specific field project that we started in Honduras was dedicated to the idea of training artisan woodworkers, or chair makers in particular, to earn a livelihood from well-managed forests. The idea being that the ability to earn a livelihood from forests was crucial to preserving those forests, to providing incentives for the people who live there to manage and maintain them, and rather than to convert them to agriculture. WARP eventually evolved, became Greenwood, established Fundación Madera Verde as its own legal nonprofit entity about 10 years ago. And Madera Verde has been fully owned and operated by Hondurans for the last 5 years. When we talk about a green broker network, I think it's important to point out that the word broker has very mixed connotations, particularly south of the U.S. border, where the word translates into Spanish as coyote. And that's no accident, because for centuries, the traditional broker's role has been to look after the interests, and I would say mainly the immediate financial interests and the very short-term interests of the buyer. It's traditionally been a one-sided, lopsided function that really doesn't serve the interests of forest producers or even the long-term interests of the clients very well in ensuring a stable, sustainable resource over the long haul. When we talk about a green broker network, we're considering our clients to be at both ends of the spectrum, both the forest producers, the individual artisans and community groups that we work with, and the buyers at the other end who purchase the products made by those artisans and sawyers and community forest owners. It's really about investing in human capital in every link of the value chain. The principal actors in our Greenwood and Madera Verde green broker value chain start on the one hand, as I mentioned, with those producers, the local cooperatives in Honduras and the individual artisans. And moving up the chain, Madera Verde is the facilitator, the implementer of forest management and a lot of the productive activities that happen on the ground. Greenwood also interacts with those productive activities, helps with the training, and acts as a broker to the clients in the marketplace, who are represented on the far right of the chain. Taylor Guitars has been a long-standing client of our the Green Broker Network that I'm going to be explaining in more detail, but there are other clients as well, and it's an expanding and developing market. Within the Green Broker Network, we fulfill a number of functions that fit more traditionally into the nonprofit side, or are thought of as being more in the for-profit side of the equation. The nonprofit side, you can read the list, but there are the traditional activities of skill training and forest management and research, and on the for-profit side, we do product development, marketing, sales, chain of custody management, business training and support. So we really are a hybrid model that blends these two aspects. And the network, the drivers of the network, or are really represented by these three major components. Begins with the forest management. It then moves into the woodworking and what we call appropriate technology, which I'll explain a little bit more as we get further into it. And then it ends with the marketing and sales in the marketplace. And it's really crucial that these three components, these three drivers, be all functional, all operational, and all very highly integrated, because there's a lot of information that flows back and forth between them. The demand from the marketplace dictates to a large extent what is harvested in the forests, It dictates what's made in the woodworking sector. Obviously, the resource base is fundamental. The available tree species and non-timber forest products will inform the woodworking and design process, and will guide us in what we go out to sell. So it's crucial that these be closely related, because on their own, if you think of it as a three-legged stool, any one of these legs taken away and the stool won't stand. All too often, unfortunately, the marketing and sales component is the weakest link in this chain, and sometimes the least well understood. But we do our best to address that in all three of these components. It begins, as I said, with the forest management, and that takes place in both primary natural forests and secondary forests, and it involves inventories, forest management plans, harvest plans, permitting processes that are highly complex and not always the easiest thing to negotiate in tropical countries. Secondary forest management is something that that we introduced in Honduras, and in fact, we established and managed the first, and to my knowledge, the only approved secondary forest management plan in the country. Basically, because secondary forests had been considered really not having the value, not having a management value. They're considered really primary forests on their way to becoming agriculture. We attempted to address that, doing inventories of species and developing products that could be made from those species under a management plan. We did the same thing for the non-timber forest product shown at the left, which is a vine called mimbre, and we also established a management plan for that mimbre vine. And to my knowledge as well, there is no other management plan for a non-timber forest species in Honduras. Part of what we do as well is enrichment planting, mixed species in agroforestry plantations. And this brings us to the woodworking and appropriate technology component. As you can see here, the women are working at very traditional shaving horses using draw knives. We often use simple, even ancient hand tools that can be used safely in a home environment. The work is often fit around other household occupations. It's very artisanal in nature. In the background from this slide, you can see a fellow working at the far right on a foot-powered treadle lathe. These are tools that are hundreds of years old, but in communities that have no electricity, they're eminently appropriate, and it is very possible to make high-quality work using these tools. There's another shot of a different lathe that's been rigged up on the right with a bicycle chain drive and a counterweight to enable the turner to work a heavier bowl and still operate the machine with foot power. On the left is a bandsaw mill that's preparing mahogany guitar parts. It's really, when we talk about appropriate technology, what we're talking about is balancing all of the resources, and it's the natural resource of what the forest will yield with the human resources that are available, the level of training and skill and passion among our artisans and partners, and the infrastructure and technical resources, the financial capital available, and which is often minimal. So it's really balancing all of those resources to come up with the right mix. To that mix, we add world-class instruction, and Greenwood really represents a network, a global network of experts in virtually any and all kinds of woodworking skills, from chair making to sawmilling, carving, boat building, musical instrument making. We've done all of that at one time or another in Honduras and elsewhere in Peru, where we also operate a project in conjunction with a local Peruvian organization. The objective is to train the trainers, to build the local capacity, so that those students become trainers themselves within their own communities and then to other communities beyond, and potentially outside of the country. This slide gives a representation of the real range of products that grew out of that initial chair making venture that I mentioned started in 2003 in Honduras. It began with chairs, such as are shown in the top photo around the table, and like the one that Omar is holding on the right. It has since morphed to include the bottom, from chairs to benches, tables, and including the mimbre baskets that are shown in the middle there, and the turned wooden pens that are made either on small power lathes or the foot pedaled lathes that I showed you in the earlier slides. All of these products that you're looking at here are marketed locally within Honduras, with a couple of very minor exceptions. We think that there's great potential in marketing some of these internationally, but there's also a lot of value in local markets and in keeping a mix of local and export markets. Local markets are much easier for the artisans themselves to manage and maintain. Very hard for an artisan to manage an export market on their own. So we like that mix. We just want to strengthen it. We began our first entry into the export business about 13 years ago, around the year 2000, when we exported a container of ship's knees, which you can see in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, which are cut from the roots and buttresses or the branch sections of tropical timbers. And as you can see, the grain follows the right angle curve of those pieces that are then fitted inside the hull of the schooner that's afloat there in the picture. And so it supports it. It forms a bracing system with the ribs of the boat between the hull and the deck. And we exported those to Mystic Seaport Museum in Connecticut, not far from Yale. And they were used in the construction of the reproduction of the schooner Amistad, the famous slave ship that was in the film. This process led us to almost 15 years now of a host of other export ventures, the most successful of which has been the export sale of guitar parts, beginning with Taylor Guitar Company. And I think there's a lot of there's Bob Taylor's comment that nothing happens until somebody sells something, I think carries a lot of meaning in our green broker network, because it really depends on tying the marketplace to the productive side of the value chain. If that link is broken, you've got people managing forests and no place for those products to go, or people in the market looking for products that they can't get. It may be. I guess I should mention that we initiated the export sale of guitar
Scott?
parts. Yes. Yadira.
Yeah. Hello to everyone. Just want to emphasize about the expression that you have highlighted, or nothing happens until somebody sells something. Exactly is the way we get into Fundación Madera Verde and Greenwood relation. When you see the slides with Omar and you are mentioning about local markets, we as foresters we were really interested in how the people who had started with a project kept selling these chairs, but the project wasn't there anymore, but they kept selling chairs. But we were wondering what the wood was legal or not. So that's how we, at the very beginning, we get really interested about Greenwood and the work you were doing, because we said these people is really keep selling. I mean, all the artisans were still selling their products, but they didn't have any more support of a project, and that was what made it really interested to work with Greenwood. Just to make that point.
No, that's great, Yadira, and it's also a perfect example of the value of local markets, which are often overlooked in the scheme of many large-scale development projects, where the focus is entirely on export, 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 and that's where the big dollars are for sure in the export markets. But it's if you have an artisan that you can train to make a product, and they can go out and sell it to their neighbor, and they can then take it and sell it to the restaurant down the road. That's the building of a sustainable supply chain, and that's a crucial relationship. The other point I wanted to make here is that it took us about 4 years, 3 to 4 years. We sent 50 sample what are called guitar sets, sides, back, and necks, to Taylor Guitars, and they said they look great, send us a container. It took us 3 or 4 years to produce a container. It meant installing a band sawmill. It meant training people through boat building actually to use the mill to produce planks, and then eventually we produced a product. It's easy to see, I think, it's easy for people to understand why a community might find a benefit or a value in establishing that relationship with a high-value client like Taylor Guitars. Maybe not so easy to see what is in it for the client, and I've just put a few of those factors on the left there through risk mitigation, access to the resource over the long haul, ensuring legality through the Lacey Act, FLECT, and CITES, the kinds of international norms that are now increasingly becoming essential for anybody who's operating legally in the wood products business. And then, of course, it's also the contribution that it lends to the corporate brand and social responsibility and good relationships with their own customers, with their own employees as well. And it's also, this whole thing is really about relationships in both directions with our producers, with our clients, the customers, and between Greenwood and Madera Verde as well. It's just good old-fashioned business. All of this is aimed at delivering what is often called a triple bottom line, delivering value and benefits across the spectrum from the environment to social to economic. And that's very much at the heart of this project and what we're dedicated to. Before I jump into a kind of case study here of the guitar part process, I just want to give you a very quick context of where we operate in Honduras. As you can see, Honduras is a very poor country. The per capita GDP is just over $2,000. It's got the dubious distinction of now having the highest homicide rate in the world, and it's gotten a lot of horrendous press as being now one of the primary entry points for narco trafficking, drugs moving north from Colombia into the States. There's a lot of pressure from the agricultural sector, from cattle ranching, industrial oil palm plantations, all of which places an incredible squeeze and pressure on communities, small forest holders, and an atmosphere that is extremely difficult, very, very challenging to work in. And I'm not going to go through all of these, the different items I've highlighted on this list. Every time Yadira and I sit down and do this PowerPoint, we add another one or two challenges or risks to the list. I guess I would say that in the last year or so, the one that has created the greatest challenge to all of us, to Greenwood and Madera Verde, and especially to our community partners, is what's shown at 3 o'clock there on the right. The increased activity in land invasions and forest conversion, we'll talk a little bit more about this as we get into it. But it's really affected all three of the major community cooperatives that we work with in producing guitar parts, and some of them have experienced 15 to 20% forest loss over just the last few years from illegal invaders, and who are not really coming in to high grade or poach high value timber so much as just to clear and burn in forest, in converting it to agriculture. And in the absence of any meaningful governance in the area, it's become virtually impossible for these communities to withstand that pressure. And so we, Greenwood, Madera Verde, working closely with all of our allies, the international donor community, and other organizations, and with our local partners, and trying to generate support and greater governance in the area. And this brings us right into the Sico-Paulaya Valley, to the community of Copén, which was the first community where Greenwood and Madera Verde began working around 1999. It's been our long-standing, steadfast partner in the region for almost 15 years now. This is this provides a little more context of where we're working in relation to the Rio Plátano Biosphere Reserve, which is this is a overall map of Honduras, and the nucleus of the biosphere is the portion shaded in red in the center. It's surrounded by the lighter yellow-colored area, which is the buffer zone, and those neon green blocks that are pulled out are the managed forest areas of our community partners. And as you can see, there's on the far left, they're described as the management areas of five different forest areas, totaling roughly I think it's 16,000 or so hectares, and they lie in the buffer zone, immediately adjacent to the Rio Plátano Biosphere Reserve, which is a World Heritage Site in danger. And these communities really play a key role in stabilizing that frontier area, and hopefully providing more restricted access to the biosphere, preventing further incursions, and those are still ongoing, which is why it's been placed in endangered status. Copén is a small community, as you can see, was one of the first to become FSC certified in 1998, and in 2010 it was recognized by the FAO as one of 18 model forests in Latin America. And Copén has formed an agroforestry cooperative called Brisas de Copén, which has 23 members. The boat, by the way, in the upper right-hand corner is one of the boats that were built with help from instruction from Mystic Seaport in Connecticut, and it was built in part originally to transport timber from the community to the roadhead, and also to get experience using the sawmill, and potentially to open a new productive enterprise. Access to Copén is over over roads or through rivers where there used to be roads that were built in the teens by the Standard Fruit Company in Honduras, and this area was opened up with a narrow gauge railway. And that bridge above is one of the last remnants of that old enterprise. But everything that goes into that valley has to come out. The machinery goes in, people go in to work there. Every stick of wood that is produced and sold has to come out on these same roads, which have been improved lately from when these pictures were taken, but it's still extremely challenging. And this is just to indicate the forest management process, the indication of trees in the baseline harvest map on the right, the identification of the seed tree. It's really low intensity logging. As you can see here, a harvest area in this particular year was 23 hectares in size, with roughly 1 mahogany tree per hectare, which is fairly typical for the density of mahogany through that part of the north coast of Honduras in the broadleaf forest. And roughly 8 trees are cut in that forest per year. Some years maybe 6, some years 10. It's a very low intensity, low impact harvest process. When the trees are felled, they are the initial step is to convert the logs into cants using chainsaw and an Alaska mill, or what is called locally a marco. And then those cants are then transported, either floated by water or on mule, to the community sawmills, which are typically about a 3-hour walk or mule ride from the forest harvest sites to the community sawmills. So these are very remote locations, and it's a extremely labor-intensive process. There are two financial keys here to this process, to making this work, and one of them is that we have been able to secure advance payments from Taylor and some of our other guitar part clients that that often result in money going into the communities, into the system, sometimes as much as a year ahead of the time when those products are ultimately delivered. That's a crucial tool in this whole process, because as you can imagine, all of these steps in the process that are so labor intensive require a lot of money to get them rolling. The other real key to this was the access to low interest loans, which we were able to secure through a private foundation. Our philosophy is that we don't give, the only thing we give away is information, and we don't give tools away. The tools are earned through the productive enterprise that we've developed. And in this case, all three of our community partners in the Sico-Paulaya Valley have purchased their own bandsaw mills with the proceeds from their guitar part harvest. And in 2.5 years, and that translates into a little more than $50,000 that these groups were able to earn to purchase these mills and to pay for the interest on the loans. Ownership is responsibility. It's really the foundation of sustainable development. And I'm going to take a drink of tea to soothe my throat for a moment here. This is just the Wood-Mizer bandsaw mill in action, sawing guitar parts. This slide is really interesting. It shows the revenue from the gross revenue from the guitar part sales over a 7-year period from 2005 to 2012. And a couple of things I would add to describe what you're looking at here in this increase. There are a couple of factors that are contributing to that dramatic rise in income. One is that on the left in 2005 we were dealing with a single forestry cooperative of Copén. Around 2008 we added a second group, Mirabesa, and 2010 a third group, Limoncito. So as we added more groups, we added more volume, more sales, more revenue. The other thing is that we began with a single dimension part and a single grade for in guitar parts, and that has now evolved into at least 5 different grades, 5 different dimensions and 3 different grades. And so the ability to get greater yield has resulted in greater income. Last year we also added another client who bought essentially 80 or 90% of the residual wood that was not consumed by the guitar part market. So the diversification of products and grades and quality and the addition of community suppliers has resulted in that increase. In expanding those products, we've also, some of the products are increasing the value to the groups. We're selling them for even more profit than we were able to initially. I should mention that there's one anomaly here that I only recognized after we put this together, and that's if you look at the timeline on the bottom, you'll see it starts at 2005 and there's a gap in 2010 to 12. We missed 11, and that's an oversight that I will eventually correct here on this chart, but basically what it reflects is that what had normally been a 1-year harvest process between 2010 and 2012 took 1.5 years to generate the parts that would have been available to sell in 2011 were not ready until 2012. So if this were reflecting 2011, and when it is ultimately corrected to show that, there'll be a sharp drop in 11 and then an increase in 12. And that was largely a reflection of the delayed permitting process that we were really kept us, our groups stymied for 6 months or so in 2011 and led us right into the rainy season, which further delayed the process. This slide points to the diversification of the product line that I was just describing and trying to get the highest value out of every tree. We like to use the metaphor hasta el sonido in Spanish, or down to the squeal. We're trying to use as much of that tree as possible. The community, our community partners got a particular kick out of the schematic drawing in the upper right-hand corner. It was something that they could all immediately relate to. And I showed them one of a cow, and as I explained to them, we don't want to turn the entire log into hamburger. And we want to be able to pick out the parts that are tenderloin and get the highest value out of those. And yes, there will be a hamburger, not out of this pig, but there will be parts that are more or less valuable, and we want to get the most we can out of the most valuable parts, and and get the greatest yield out of the whole tree. And the instructor on the left, John Curtis, is running a group of sawyers through the process. He's done this drawing on the lower right that shows how high-value necks, backs, and sides can be cut out of a single log. And this diversification has led us to the production of sample fingerboards, which are the ones there are shown out of made out of paleto, which is a very dense tropical wood, and is being tested by a couple of clients in Spain and the US for possible marketing opportunities. Ukulele necks shown on the right, and a relationship at the bottom with Brian Boggs, the chairmaker in North Carolina, who is the one who purchased a lot of those residual offcuts from the guitar part harvest for his furniture. Underlying this whole process is really the power of transparency, and information is power. And when we sat down with some of our cooperative partners after one of the first harvests, I distinctly remember them kind of counting up the money at the end of the process and then asking, where did it all go? And thus evolved this extremely detailed accounting system that enumerates every step in the process. Every step has a cost, every step has a value, and it's crucial that the producers get to understand what those costs, what those values are, not just so they can understand it in a theoretical way and appreciate that, but they can then take control of that process and understand that here's a spot where we can take more control or have more involvement in this process or that process, and we can capture more of that value for ourselves. And that's really the basis of development, and is a cornerstone to everything we do. This page just shows the community investments that the original community of Copén made over that 5-year period from 2007 to 2012 in a host of local infrastructure. One of the things that they did that's highlighted in those photos on the left is they used some of this money to invest in the installation of a micro hydro electric project in the community, delivering electric street lights for the first time in the community, refrigeration, and the ability to operate small machinery in the community. They also have accident insurance. All 3 of our groups have accident insurance. The only cooperatives that I'm aware of in the area that do. And of course, the biggest ticket item on this in terms of their expense was the investment in the Woodmiser Band Sawmill, which is now behind them. So it's going to liberate more money in the future for investing in local, in other local infrastructure. We track the timber from the forest to the client using a barcoding GPS reference system, handheld computers. Barcodes get attached to every piece of wood that comes out of the forest. Every time that wood is resawn, reprocessed, it receives another barcode that is scanned and related back to the original mother tree from which it was harvested. Until the doors are shut on the container gets a single barcode which embodies or incorporates all of the multiple barcodes and multiple trees that are within that particular shipment of wood. And this is just an example of the traceability report from one community, the cooperative of Miravesa, that shows you how it goes from the arbol or the tree in the upper left to the cant cutting, which is the second from the left column. It then gets split into more barcodes as those cants are cut into multiple pieces. That continues through the kiln in the center, through the grading process when ends are cut and the pieces receive a new barcode, and then ultimately it gets combined again because you can see on the far right all the barcodes are the same. That's being the container barcode, which embodies all of the other barcodes within it. So it's a way of our being able to manage the chain of custody in a secure way and to assure legality to our clients and to the regulating authorities within the country and outside of the country. And this is, you can't read the type on this, but it's an infographic that was put together by the Forest Legality Alliance, which is a cooperative organization between World Resources Institute and the Environmental Investigation Agency funded by USAID. And our project was a case study by the Forest Legality Alliance. And I know time is running short. I'm talking on here. So I'm going to go kind of quickly through these last few slides because I do want to provide some time for questions. We also are actively engaged in research, forest monitoring through satellite imagery, and what we call incidencia, which is promoting governance and involvement of our community partners in the forestry sector. Among the kinds of research we do, all of our research is very squarely aimed at practical needs and identified problems. So we've done research into heart rot, the incidence of heart rot in mahogany trees. We identified a new species in collaboration with Missouri Botanical Garden on the left. The mimbre vine that I mentioned is now called Monstera Madera Verde. And we've been experimenting with DNA tracing as well of mahogany to establish a DNA library of mahogany DNA for help in, again, in legality and potentially in identifying superior strains of mahogany. This is the FAO diploma for Copén for their model forest distinction. And finally, just to summarize quickly, our lessons from 20 years in the field: self-sufficiency, no giveaway, the crucial match between the technology and resources, that's the appropriate tech aspect of what we do. Point three, the balancing of those three components: the forestry, the woodworking and production, and then the marketing and sale. Four, diversify everything. diversify products, markets, clients. All of that will strengthen the sustainability of the enterprise. Cultivate partnerships locally, internationally. We work with many different partners. In terms of our donors, we have been generously supported by U.S. Forest Service international programs, USAID Pro Parque Project, the October Hill Foundation, the Arthur B. Schultz Foundation provided the capital for the low-interest loans. In Honduras, Madera Verde works closely with Bosques del Mundo, a Danish nonprofit organization. CATIE, their Proyecto Finfor, and the UNDP, Proyecto Ecosistemas. Point 6, real development takes real time. As we started in the very beginning, I neglected to mention that that when we started in 1993, the communities we worked with were using pit saws, 17th century technology. You can't move from there to here, to using handheld computers and GPS referencing of guitar parts overnight. It takes real time, real long-term investment. 7, information is power, transparency is crucial. And 8, hand it off, train the trainers, and ultimately experiment. There is no one-size-fits-all to sustainable development or successful investing in forests or in anything else. And what's needed is lots of experiments, lots of trials, and plenty of errors along the way. But if we're not willing to make mistakes and to learn from them, we will never succeed, we'll never move forward. So I've run about 5 minutes or so over my time. I really appreciate your patience, and I guess we'll see if Ben has accumulated any questions, and I'd be happy to address them. And I'm sure Yadira is standing by, and I haven't given her a chance to say a whole lot.
Thank you so much,
You
Scott.
made a good job telling the story. So yes, I am here.
Okay. Any questions, Ben, that have come in, or?
Yes, there are a number relating to agencies and partnerships, and so I might suggest asking, what is the best way to contact you with any follow-up questions or to find out more?
Well, the websites are shown right here on the screen, and you can get to us through the website, but you can contact me through Scott, S-C-O-T-T, at greenwoodglobal.org, and that gets to me directly. Yadira, you might be able to give your address.
Yeah, I was saying that you did a great job and tell the story. And we are there in the bottom Fundación Madera Verde, and you can find us in this website. But in terms of, I can write here my email address, or it says Y as in my name, Molina Madera at maderaverdeHonduras.org.hn. That's pretty much you have the address.
So through the website, in any case.
Yeah. I just want to make a point about transparency. When you mentioned we give all the information to the even when we have financial. That's pretty much what I do, looking for financial resources for projects and new projects for people and the communities. Even though they have in 1 year, they may have several projects going on. The idea of not giving away is just to make sure that they know how much every step costs, and they can keep the money to invest for the next year production. So I just want to emphasize when you were talking about our philosophy, and just to make
Great.
sure. Okay, thanks.
Perhaps another question for Yadira Molina. How have you seen local capacity grow? Are there any major challenges to financial literacy or community policing or transportation And are you able to hire all the people you want to? What do you see as the major challenges?
Yeah, when you say literacy, that's one of the very highest challenge because as Scott mentioned and showing one of the slides, you have to get you cannot imagine any kind of resource as the picture of the little the pork when you have to show them that the way they are going to cut the tree is the way they are going to get more money. And that was a very long process to make sure they understand because sometimes they are not able to see how they can invest more, but at the long run, they are going to get more profits because they are so used to get money like every day for just for feeding their kids. And so it's really hard to make them understand loan investment and for profit. I don't know if that idea of that you have to invest and wait is kind of really hard in their minds to get.
I would just add that isn't that the key to sustainability, just on a global scale, and it's on all ends, the difference between a short-term and a long-term horizon.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very insightful. And Scott, oh, excuse me.
Okay.
And Scott, that's very insightful. Where do you see the long term? Maybe this will be the last question before we wrap up.
Well, I think there is enormous potential both within and beyond Honduras for this kind of green broker network, this approach to sustainable forest management and sustainable development. I think there's a lot of potential for us to expand. Again, going back to the diversification point that I made a couple times earlier, to expand and diversify the local partners, the communities that we're working with, the forest resource base. We barely scratched the surface of other species that could be transformed, and to develop new products, markets, clients. And so I think there's enormous potential within Honduras still, and beyond. Where, as I mentioned, Greenwood is working in Peru now, and both Greenwood and Madera Verde have contacts in many countries in Central and South America, and the same problems exist everywhere to some extent or another. And I think this approach can go a long ways towards helping to address them.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. And I just want to emphasize always about transparency and sustainability for us. Transparency is the key. As much as you share information with them, you keep their hopes and you keep their dignity, and they don't feel anymore. Oh, that means the time's up.
That was
Okay.
my time.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, the point for us is to make sure they understand they are not being used for a project result. And we keep them in a process, not in a project. Every project have an end, and we don't want them to feel that they are part of the result of the projects. And they see it's a process for years and years, and they are growing and getting more and learning more as well as we do. So I think that's the key for us. That's the more like we'll say the key of the sustainability of this process. Thank you.
It boils down to human capital, human relationships. So thank you, Yadira.
Okay.
Thank you, Yadira, so much for joining us all the way from Honduras.
Is that it then?
Yeah. No, thank you for inviting me for this. Any kind of further information, I will be really glad to give to anyone. And yeah, I want to show this works. And even though this is happening in one of the more wild areas of Honduras, people have been able to keep legal because that's the hardest part, being legal in a very illegal area. So we are really glad to show and share more information as much as you want to. Thanks.
Well, and thank you again to you, Ben, and to the Yale Center for Business and Environment. We really appreciate it. And thank you to, I've been waiting to say this, but thank you to all of our listeners from around the world. So for your patience in sitting in with us today.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to all of you also from the Honduran side. Thank you, Ben, for inviting us, and hopefully my English is gonna get better as much as we do this, and I can be able to answer more of your question clearly. Thank you anyway.
An excellent job. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Yadira Molina. Thank you, Scott Landis. And thank you to the audience. And with this, I'll be signing off. Nature's Returns. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.